trying to figure out what the best starting point is here. Okay, I'm going to start kind of a little bit of the way in.
Okay.
How common do you think it is to live a double life?
Oh.
For if you're a marginalized person, I mean that was about women living a double life,
Yeah.
but I think we have lots of other groups.
Yeah, I mean, it came up in the talks earlier in today's event, right? Mm-hmm. Where, can you be your authentic self at work? Do you have to kind of hide who you are, right? And come out of the closet or not? It's funny, I have a story when I was a little girl, like 3rd, 4th grade, I had this best friend. And we had this conversation in the girls' bathroom in my elementary school, like, are you the same at school as you are at home? No. Even at that young age, we had developed this idea that we had to be a little bit different in public and at school than we could be at home. That's my own personal anecdote, but I think that, I do think it's a common experience by many people who consider themselves minorities.
Is there some way that we can help people, feel more comfortable being authentic?
This
kind of
right?
thing? But I mean, within work.
Within work. One of the things we explored here, and I couldn't go in depth because you're always limited by time, is this idea of community. And at least, I don't know what you think, Denise, but over the last, I'd say 5 years, women in tech communities and other minority and tech communities have really sprung up inside of companies and across the industry.
Yeah.
I think that is helping. I think that things are starting to change. And like I mentioned, story can change culture, but it is a long, I always say, the F word game.
I would like to say, so when I was at Apple a long time ago now, 30 years ago, there was a gay student union, that's what they called themselves. And they were very actively pushing an agenda. And they were helped by the fact that Elizabeth Birch was our chief litigator. Elizabeth Birch, for those of you who don't know, later was the executive director of the Human Rights Council, which is the blue thing with the equal sign, right? And she was using her Rolodex to call anybody, any CEO in the Valley, to twist their arm to accept domestic partnership. And that was like her single agenda, right? And she, I think, should be known as the person who made that happen. But they used that, they leveraged that voice that they created inside of Apple to make Apple at least more consistent. And now the guy who runs Apple is openly gay, and that's a big win, that's a big deal. I don't see women's groups pushing in the same direction inside of companies as much. And I think we could very easily.
We could. I think it's a combination of community and leveraging those types of people in positions of power. And I think sometimes we're a little too hesitant to ask. One of the things I've learned since I left my comfy day job and started as an entrepreneur.
Which you did.
It was very comfy, but is when you ask, for me, especially among women, they show up.
Yeah.
They show up. So somebody asked me recently, like, what's your number one piece of advice for younger women? And I said, ask for the job lead, ask for the introduction to this person, and just, rising up together and maximizing people who are in positions of power to be your advocate.
So when I joined tech, most of the women that were in positions of power, and you and I knew some of the same ones, were kind of like guys running around in skirts. I mean, they had fought to get where they were going on men's terms,
right? And
they weren't particularly sisterly to more junior women. Are you seeing that change now?
I am seeing it change, but I'm also told by almost not every woman I interview, but a lot of the women I interview, that still exists. There's a competitive nature among women, particularly at the top, who are like, whoa, I worked really hard to get here. I got my space, step back.
Right. I'm pulling that ladder up behind me. Thank you.
Exactly. But I think that that's becoming less common, and I do feel like women are supporting women, and I also feel, and Nithya and I have had this conversation, that a shift has happened in the last, I'd say just 5 years, where you don't have to embody masculine traits to be a successful woman in tech, and that didn't used to be the case. I'm a perfect example. I worked among many, many men in the Valley, and I, would adopt their characteristics as my own for a while, and I think I've started to shift, and a lot of people I've talked to don't feel like they have to do that anymore. You can show up as a woman in tech, and you've got a unique set of characteristics and experiences that really contribute to all areas of tech.
See, I have been forever told that it's nice that I'm feminine as a leader, but I don't even know what that means. Seriously.
Well, it means something different to different. It means, I mean, gender, right? It's different for everybody, right? It means something different to everybody. But I think to your point, like people telling you that, it takes all kinds of people to build the technology that will define the future. When I talk about a less inclusive world tomorrow than today, I mean, we in tech are building the reality that we will live in tomorrow. And if we don't have every single type of person, scary, yikes.
Well, also, we
scares
can't,
the hell out of me.
given what's happening in this country right now, and again, I don't actually live here anymore, but given what's happening in this country, we really have to fight even harder against that, because there's a push to try to push us back out of the workforce. Okay, so about privilege. How can people acknowledge privilege and kind of get through it and become better allies? It looks like Guy did a very good job of self-questioning, but he's a rare guy.
I know, that guy is a rare guy.
Guy's a rare guy.
That's why I had coffee with him, and I actually was in the meeting that he's talking about. So were you.
Yeah, I was.
I don't know if you remember that, yeah.
Yes, I remember it.
It was uncomfortable.
That person, we're going to talk about her in a minute.
Okay. I think I certainly have my privilege too, right? And Guy and I talked about that when we were discussing before he went on camera. And I think a lot of it is listening and knowing that you have to be curious, intentional, and listen. I have been so fortunate that so many women of color have agreed to talk to me, both on camera and off camera. And the best conversations are ones where we show up and say, I might say something really offensive and not even know it, right? Both of us, right? But let's just say, okay, that's all right. Let's have this conversation and learn from each other. I'm getting goosebumps saying those words because it just inspires me. And I think having those types of candid, open conversations, I'm going to put my foot in my mouth. Please accept that I'm human, and let's learn from each other.
I super appreciate when people point it out, especially if they're sort of kind in pointing it out rather than standing up and starting to scream at me. Which we did a fair amount of that in the early days of open source. Okay, now, coming from a Buddhist point of view, men's advocacy groups, we are them, they are us. We are a part of the same world. What do we do about that? I mean, there's so much fear in just kind of, is that even something we can take on?
Oh, that's a hard question.
Sorry.
No, I don't have a good answer for that. Like Claire, I wasn't aware of men's rights groups. They're very closely associated with the incel community. So men's rights groups do not represent men and all men. This is a very extreme sect of this type of community. I could do a whole documentary, like a 2-hour feature, just on these types of groups. But I didn't go in depth. I don't know what the answer to that is. I liked introducing the idea through Claire's story because it shows the complexity, right? She was excluding people from her groups. And I think she learned something as a result of that. Men are now allowed in her groups. They rarely show up. This group that sued her didn't want to go to her meetings. They wanted to take her out of business.
Right.
So, but it helps to demonstrate the complexity. So I guess I'd say, I think somebody mentioned it earlier today, these are difficult things. These are not, we are humans and we are messy. And these are not easy things to fix. But I hope by sharing the stories, it makes you think.
I used to always teach speaking skills at She's Geeky, which is another event that's a female-only event. And I talked a lot to Cloer about why it was that way. And what I found was a lot of women that would not have spoken up in a mixed audience were more willing to talk.
Right.
And there is probably a place for that.
I agree. So I mean, my personal opinion, I'm happy to share that, is that we need all spaces. So I believe that we need spaces for just men, and we need spaces for just women, and we need spaces for LGBTQ. But we also need spaces where we all come together, right? The slide earlier today, the segregation, inclusion, right? The ultimate goal is that we're all working together and but I do think that at least now in the evolution of this movement, I feel like there is a need for some spaces where people can do that, because some people don't feel comfortable sharing.
Yeah, they really don't.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's go ahead and talk about the role of social justice warriorship in in tech. It's a big topic. This is the time that Guy got called out, and Nithya was there too.
Yeah.
There was in one of the very large, very influential open source communities, there was a woman who was working on behalf of the community to create more inclusion and diversity, but she was surpassing the community's actual appetite to go there. Even many of the marginalized people that she supposedly represented would come up to me privately and say, she's not talking for me. Yeah. She was willing to throw the project under the bus, specifically the tech under the bus, for her agenda. And that's the point that it broke for me. Like, I was really trying to find bridges with her until I realized that she didn't care about whether or not this open source project was technically able to go forward. She just wanted to talk about the social issue that and she'd picked this community because it already had a fair amount of diversity, which is super interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway, she's moved along to another community now because she couldn't gain purchase there. But what do you do when you are attacked like that? Because she was running around attacking anybody. She attacked me too. Mm-hmm. I'm apparently a gender traitor and a rape apologist. So there you go.
Those are strong words.
She was into that.
That's another hard one.
Did you think they were going to be easy?
No, I knew they would not be easy. These aren't easy topics. I think that particular situation and using that to inform my response. I mean, I feel like everybody shows up, like I say in the voiceover, with a variety of experiences that inform how they show up and how they see the world. In a case like that, or similar cases, there's something going on, right? They have had a bad experience or experiences, and that's informing how they show up. And so I think, while that is a difficult thing, I think we have to listen, right? We have to listen and honor that there's a reason that they're taking that extreme of an approach, and learn from that as well. The response from us to that type of behavior may show our previous experiences, right? And that's where you can sometimes hit these walls.
Oh yeah, totally. She completely surprised me. I've never not been able to talk to somebody about diversity.
I've been in your shoes. I know what you're talking about. You're like, what? But I guess it's empathy, right? I guess that's what I'm describing, is understanding that everybody has lived a messy life until the moment they show up in front of you having that conversation. And, I hope it doesn't sound like an easy out with this answer, but I do think listening is really powerful. When males, allies, ask me what can they do, listen to the women in your workplace and in your life, because you learn so much when you listen, and very few of us really, really, really listen.
Okay, thank you. All right, now the VC situation.
Oh.
Yeah, so are women just stuck bootstrapping because it's too hard to do anything else?
No. I liked making the point in the film that a lot of female entrepreneurs go a different route than the traditional VC route. And I like that. I like that theme, that like, you know what? I'm not going to do it the traditional way. I'm going to go do it my own way. I love that. But women need more access to venture capital, and my opinion is we need more women writing the damn checks. We need more female VCs. Yeah.
Well, all we really need is one to be super successful, and then we'll have a bunch of them.
I know. I'm considering, we have 2 more episodes in this series, and I'm considering one focused on the VC world.
You gonna talk to Ellen Powell?
Maybe. We'll see.
Okay. Do you feel, so you'll remember the story that people tried to fire me for the first 5.5 years that I was at Sun because I was an agent of change, and you always want to shoot the messenger. And then in the last 6 months, everybody wanted to take credit for my work, and particularly men wanted to do that. And I was really upset about it for about a month. And then I realized that I didn't actually want to be an officer of that company, and that this meant I could declare victory and go somewhere else and get paid more.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. But so I redefined success for myself, because it was kind of the only option. The other option was to be miserable.
Yeah.
Right, or tap dance faster, which I wasn't willing to do. Are women doing that? Are women routinely redefining what success means?
I think so. The hundreds of women I've interviewed and talked to, it's one of the main themes, is they are defining success for themselves. And it has a lot to do with, being the primary caretakers in your families. It has to do with, the role of women in society and what does success really look like. When you go into a workplace that's been dominated by men, there is a, this is what success looks like. But I think with more and more women coming into the workplace over the last 3-4 decades, right? I think that finally we're starting to redefine what that looks like. especially in tech. I love Elena's quote, right? That's not what success looks like for me, right? I love that, and it's different for everybody. And I think, when you step into your power and you're confident enough in what you're doing, you can define what that means for you.
And that's why I love the power of community message from this piece, because, and again, I'm speaking to open source here because we're at All Things Open, but the open source community, it can be maddening, but it's also so supportive, incredibly so. I mean, we figured out community over code 20 years ago. It's more important to be friends with the people you're working with. That doesn't mean you can throw the project under the bus from a technical perspective. That's still a problem. But you can lean on that community. And that's a beautiful thing. And I think it's important to remember that open source was started by people who didn't fit in to the normal paradigm, which is the same as all the marginalized people that are coming to tech now. We all started in the same place. Although the early folks in open source were so out on the spectrum that we're revising things a little bit. We're saying, well, that's not okay behavior anymore because we want to be more inclusive ourselves. But I would really encourage any of you who are wondering about this, because women have been coming up to me in the break to talk about their career aspirations. Get involved in open source, even if that's happening in your spare time. It's worth doing. My friend Andy Oliver here said, when I needed a job, I could walk in and say, you're already using my code. Right? That's very powerful. So I know it seems like an extra chore when you're trying to raise kids and you've got a job too, but if you can spend even a little bit of time every week on an open source project, it'll be a good thing for you, truly. And if you're wondering which project to get involved with, subscribe to a lot of mailing lists and see how they talk to each other and pick one that you like the feel of, because there are every flavor out there that you could hope for. There are people who are organized around being assholes. That's what they like. They should be allowed to do that, But there are also very inclusive communities, and there are technologies that are relatively easy to acquire and do interesting things with. So you guys are in good places for this. Is there anything else that you want to say about the movie? Is there anything else you guys want to ask her? Has anybody got a question?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Yeah.
Okay, we've got, do we have a runner? Does somebody want to be a runner? Cool, here's the microphone. Run away. We were going to find one of these, but I guess it didn't happen. Thank you very much. Raise your hand if you have a question. There we go. Way to step up, sister.
Sorry, I was about to leave to go get more water, but you were like, questions, so I had to say.
Good.
So Jennifer, I know you said you think it's important for everyone to have a group, and I definitely agree with that, but how do you feel about really hateful groups having their own space, like rad femmes or meninists?
So I'm not talking about those types of groups. And I know the debate, right, about freedom of speech, and I'm a huge, freedom of speech advocate, but that's not really the context in which I was talking. I was talking more about, specifically, when you say men's groups, right, what do you mean, right? There is this, in Claire's situation, this is a men's rights group that is out to oppress women because they are threatened by, women's rise. But there's lots of amazing men's groups that I think are fantastic, and men, want those types of communities too. So I personally support all of those, but certainly there are hate groups, and I absolutely 100% do not support those, right?
So you support groups that support other people, not groups that seek to take down other people?
Yeah, you said it better than me.
Okay, cool.
Thank you for that. Is there another question?
Yeah, I actually had one, but
yay.
I'm willing to give the mic up for other people.
Go ahead, you can do it.
I just wondered basically if there are particular open source projects that are seeking to have contributors that are more diverse, like women, people of color, stuff like that, and if they could shout out while they're here.
Yeah, off the top of my head, Drupal.
Okay.
Very, very, very welcoming. Node, to a certain extent, it's easy to apprehend, and there is a lot of marginalized representation there. Anybody got another one? WordPress. That was the anti-Drupal. WordPress. Also Joomla, as long as we're here talking about those. Not to diss anybody ever, right? I mean, I think that there are lots of opportunities. There are some really old school things like Debian and Apache that Debian has done a pretty good job of having Debian women really mean something. Apache has tried a couple times, and there's an attempt right now going on to coalesce, a female energy into a discussion group. So it's good. It's worth supporting that too. Andy.
So one of the things with the VC money and the other is there is sort of this: if you get VC money, you move to California, and it seems to me that if you're not from wealth, or if you're from, if you've got kids, what have you, that's, for me at least, that wasn't an option. So what about geographic, I guess, diversity and inclusion, since we're all here on the East Coast?
Yeah, right. I think the future is bright. I need some shades. I'm trying to be funny. I'm so not funny. No, I'm optimistic, actually, because I was just talking to some people this morning about what's been somewhat, there's things I love about the Valley, but there's been a bit of an exodus from the Valley of talent and dollars, because people do want to live where they want to live. They don't want to necessarily subscribe to that culture, right? And so I think that there are hubs, and there's always been incubators, right, in different cities, but I actually see a lot more investment dollars being represented through hubs in like Denver, Raleigh, Atlanta. What's that? Philadelphia. So I think that we're seeing an evolution where it's spreading around the country when in the context of the United States, right? So I think that's changing. Although, like Elena's story, right? She said, if I raise this VC, I'm going to have to move out to the Valley. It's not for me. Certainly, I think that's still a reality, but I think it's changing slowly.
I will say that in Ireland, I'm working pretty hard to get that country to set up its own VC structure, because I saw that successfully done in Sri Lanka. For island nations, it's actually pretty easy to set up your own government subsidized fund, and I think it's worth doing. Because again, if the fact that the money's all in America, and maybe a little in London, although who knows what's about to happen to that, you don't want your best and brightest to leave. You'd like them to be able to stay home.
Right.
And you'd like people to get it that it's not that glamorous to move to America. I've done tons of talks in India. In fact, you watched me do one. Please don't plan on coming to America. You're really not going to like it, right? But of course, that's the dream. So it's hard. Okay, anybody else with a question? These are great questions, by the way. It looks like, we got the mic's over there, but it'll come to you next.
So I work for Indiegogo, which is the company that was the platform for the Roar project, and it's really cool to see it, but we're actually incentivized just the exact same way as the VCs, and it's actually been really challenging to be a platform for projects that maybe just from an economic incentive perspective, like, don't make us the most money. So, it's cool to see, like, crowdfunding can solve a lot of problems for communities, community fundraising. But, like, how do you see the platforms being able to move forward when, like, a lot of the economic incentives are against, just, not doing drones all the time, or not doing whatever the hot thing is that can make the most money?
Yet another coffee maker.
Yeah. Earbuds.
I mean, my thoughts are that those platforms, with all of that said, are still doing a lot of good. I don't think that when we talk about women going alternate routes for funding, I don't think crowdsourcing is the only way that they're going alternate routes, right? Like, women are doing a lot of bootstrapping. They're raising money from, friends and family more often than men. But it sounds like you're more the expert on the platforms than I am, but I wouldn't discount them. I still think they add a lot of value for entrepreneurs, and particularly minorities. There's a really great platform in the film space called Seed and Spark. It's amazing. And it helps, women and women of color filmmakers to raise money and distribute their pieces. And I think that there's so many now, right? There's so many niche platforms for crowdfunding that I think maybe I don't know, it'd be interesting to hear your perspective, afterwards, but like maybe that's the evolution is the focus.
Yeah, I actually had that in my question, so I'm really glad you asked it. But here's my thought. How many of you guys know about the difference between Lyft and Uber? Anybody? Yeah, so Uber, you know what Uber is. Lyft is actually the first company that had that idea, also founded in San Francisco before Uber. But the guys that founded it were trying to get cars off the streets in San Francisco. That was their goal. So they organized as a public benefit corporation instead of a for-profit, classic for-profit. So that doesn't mean they can lose money, year on year and still survive. But it does mean that as a charter, their requirement is to serve the community, not the bank. And that is a really interesting idea. I'd love to see a crowdfunding platform that's set up that way. I mean, Indiegogo is already better than Kickstarter because you guys pay even on a partial raise. And that was really a good innovation. But I think we could go a little further with that because it does seem like we're falling back on self-funding through crowdfunding for things like health crises
Right.
and everything pretty much. Okay, there was another question over here. Can the mic make it?
She was second, and I'll run over.
Okay, perfect. Sorry.
Hi, so Jennifer, my question is for you. It's about the topic of this particular video. So it says the power of community, and one thing that I noticed that was common amongst most of the interviewees was that they were founders or consultants or entrepreneurs, and as an individual contributor in a large company, I think that a lot of times when I hear these kinds of stories, it's like the goal is to be on the M track, and the goal is to be either that or be an entrepreneur, and I don't want to do either of those things. And
Right.
I also think that defining leadership in that way and defining like community, you have to, be a founder to
Right.
be able to make a space, I think is discouraging personally for
Yeah,
me. So I just wanted
that's
to
really fair. And I think in another episode, we can explore that. In this one, I chose Claire and Yasmin because I wanted to show two women who had built something from scratch and then had something or someone basically threaten taking it all the way down. And so that's why I chose them for this particular episode, is I needed that kind of like, I've created this thing that's amazing, and because I'm a woman, it's gonna go away. But valid point. I have lots of friends who are not looking to be entrepreneurs or even necessarily executive management. And I think that's the majority of women in tech, right? And so very valid point, and I think that those stories are represented throughout the series.
Okay, this is going to be the last question for this section, but she's going to be back for the panel. So if you have a burning question, you can ask it during the panel. I just have to stay on time. Go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry, everybody who wants to ask. I wanted to return to the funding subject because it's important for increasing the women in tech as well. What is the role of governments and international institutions on the encouraging both organizations and funding companies or supporting women in tech?
Yeah.
That wasn't in the video. I hope it was in the second or third episode. But I'm asking you, what have you seen? Thank you.
So I haven't went really deep on that research. So all I can do, I can't give you data. I can't give you the data or the facts in response to your question. But I can tell you that businesses perform better with diverse workforces, which includes women, right? And society, as a result, benefits. And so I think government participation and contribution to this is really important. And we see that in some of what I would call the more progressive countries around the world, and I think that it's having a good impact. So I say yes. I say yes, more of that, please.
I would like to say that the Grameen Bank, which was the first microloan bank, set itself up to only loan to women.
Yeah.
And they did that because women are the ones who will actually pay back their loan and actually invest in the local economy rather than blowing the money, You guys have all seen Silicon Valley. You know how that works. By the way, if you haven't seen Silicon Valley, that is a
Pretty
docudrama. I'm here to tell you, people think that it's outlandish. Every time I watch it, I turn to my husband and go, wow, I just did that in a meeting.
Yeah.
Or, Anyway, I think that there's an acknowledged pattern among, I was going to try to come up with an adjective, beneficial is coming up, but among lenders who are being humanists and not just trying to get their 30% return, in 2.5 years, which isn't even possible anymore, but the VCs are still trying to do that. So it's going to have to change. It has, because they can't get what they wanted out of it anymore. So hopefully governments will step in, although it's going to take a different administration for our government to do that. Anybody else? Oh, I already said we couldn't. All right, hold on to your questions for the panel. It's time for another little break. We're going to come back. It is 4:18. We're going to come back at 4:30, so 12 minutes, and we'll have a half an hour of everybody up here, and you guys can ask us all questions.